something inside me was like, this is what I need to do. And I couldn't not try. I slept in a closet. We worked 7 days a week. And after Fruitvale, I woke up and I was like, oh, I still gotta pay rent and bills and figure out what my next job is and all this stuff.
Okay, everybody, we are very excited to be back with the Hollywood Hang. I am your host, Tepper, and my fellow host here,
Nick.
And we talk about the highs, lows, and hell no's of this industry. And we are really, really excited today because we have Michael Shawver here with us. Michael, hello. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me and pronouncing my name right. That's
okay. Yes.
No, it's I appreciate that very much.
I watched a bunch of interviews to be like, I'm going to nail this one. But yes, Michael is originally from Rhode Island. He developed an early working relationship with someone everybody knows, director Ryan Coogler, during their time at the University of Southern California School of Cinematic Arts. Michael has edited all of Ryan's feature films, including Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther, and most recently, Sinners. His other credits include A Quiet Place Part 2, Abigail, and the upcoming reimagining of the Thomas Crown Affair with director Michael B. Jordan. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my God. I just did a rewatch of Fruitvale Station last night just to ruin my life. I was just needed a good cry.
Yeah.
And me and my boyfriend sat there and he was like, he's like, I just don't, there is no one like Ryan Coogler. Like,
it's true.
It's just really, really wild. And so we kind of want to, you're from Rhode Island. So how did you end up getting interested in the film industry?
That's a good question. I'll try to keep it to the most riveting filled version. But like every weekend, my parents rented a movie for them, and then my sister. I have an older sister, and rented a movie for us. And every week it was like pizza and a movie on Saturday nights. And so, when you're a kid, you fall in love with certain movies. You watch certain movies over and over and over and over again. I didn't know at the time that my life would be watching a movie over and over again, changing it. But when I was about 12 or 13, my parents bought one of those big, chunky VHS camcorders, and I just went nuts, and I just got all my friends together and we made spoofs of James Bond, we made spoofs of Scream, we did everything we could. But I when I would show people and family friends what we had done, and they would laugh, or they would be like, whoa, you made that? That's initially where I caught that bug. When you can create an emotion in somebody else from something creative you do, it's and as screenwriters, when people are affected by your work, it's there's no feeling like it. Like, it's validating, it's fun. You feel like, you accomplished something. But at the time, most people don't, like, I only knew what a director was and what an actor. I barely even knew what a director did. I just knew because their name was on it. You know what I mean? But, and I remember trying to make a short film with my friends, but being frustrated that they weren't, they couldn't all be at the same place at the same time, or when I needed them to do it. And I was like, this guy, because I thought movies were shot in order, like you just do one shot and then the next shot and you go back to the next. And so, just out of pure necessity to create, I would frame up the camcorder on the TV and then play what I shot on the TV as the footage, and then record it on the camcorder, basically make a montage, a clip that way. And then I play music in the background and re-record it, and the quality became awful because of all the re-recording, but that kind of took me to the next step of visual storytelling, like without even realizing I was editing something or that was even a thing. And then, at that time we didn't have, little digital camcorders with Firewire. You could just plug right in the computer and upload your stuff. Like, it wasn't accessible to people. So when I got to high school, I saw that, on our orientation tour, I saw that they were, some kids were on a computer and like, there's some videos. I'm like, what is that? And they're like, oh, it's called Final Cut. They're editing videos. And it was just like, oh my God, a whole new like world opened up for me. And so, all these little steps kind of fed my, the fuel to pursue this and try it. And the making movies is not really something you do as a person in Rhode Island. It's just not. You get into business or accounting or teaching or work for the government. But something inside me was like, this is what I need to do. And I couldn't not try, so I went to undergrad in Rhode Island, got a job in a bunch of different restaurants, because that's what I heard you did. You wait tables and bartend, and you come out to LA, and so you can figure out, that kind of thing. And I said, you know what, I made that life decision, which I found that the biggest kind of jumps I make in life, or leveling up in life, for lack of a better term, when you make that true decision with yourself that you're going to do this, and whether it's a greater power, the universe or God, or it's your subconscious, that's you start to make these little decisions and moves. So I said, look, by the fall of 2008, I have to be in Los Angeles, and I have to try to do something. I wanted to be a director. And I was like, well, let me try a different avenue. So I Googled best film schools in the world, and USC came up. And I just wrote this essay about how I was going to change the world, and I know the power of movies, and it's going to happen no matter what, whether you help me or not. So hopefully it'll happen a little bit sooner with your help or whatever. And then they let me in, and I was like, okay, here we go, but, so, I got there, and it was the first time I ever felt like I was in a place where people understood me, because I was always that kid who could like ramble off every actor in every movie and encyclopedia, compared to everybody else where I'm from. But being there, like just feeling that sense of community. And then the other great thing about USC is that, you can sort of find your path, right? Everybody goes in, they ask all the incoming students, who wants to be a producer? A couple people raise their hand. Who wants to be an editor? Nobody raised their hand. Who wants to be a director? Every single person raises their hand. But then you find out, oh wait, I don't really like to talk to actors. I mean, I love directing. I like talking to actors. I don't want to make that statement for myself, but people find things, or like even being the person who's making all the decisions, like that's not for everybody, and a lot of directing is managing everybody's anxieties, because everybody wants to put their best work in, and all that stuff. So, I was sort of on this directing track, but my second year, I was in a directing class, and, most student films are about death or breakups, because that's the only conflict people know at that point in their lives, really. And except there was this one guy making shorts, sometimes with no dialogue, that you would just be, moved to tears at the end, or change your perspective on life. And that is exactly what I wanted to do. And so, and I was the kid that sat in the back of the class and just took everything in and listened, like raised my hand. Barely raised my hand, only answered when I was called on. But something in my gut said, you got to go talk to this guy. And that ended up being Ryan Coogler. And I said, look, I don't know how. I'd love to work with you a little bit, somehow. I know we're both in the directing class, but I can edit a little bit. And then so he's all right, cool. And then, we just, obviously he's a great guy. And we stayed in touch, and, throughout the semesters. And then he got selected for a short film, one of the bigger short films there. And, he was in the process of choosing his editors. And right before he had to decide, he caught me. It was like 10:30 at night or something after class. And he was like, hey, you know how to production design, right? And I had done a little bit for a couple classes, but I was like, yeah, totally. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. And he was like, okay, cool. So I need this and this and this and this. And I'm like, all right, yeah, that should be fine. When are you shooting? And he says, 6:30 tomorrow morning. And I'm like, what? So, I was like, yeah, I can do that. And then I go home and I panic, but I figured it out and I did it. And then I helped him on set, and I did everything I could. I have lighted, I have shooted, I have anything that he needed. And 2 days later, he chose me to be one of his editors. And, I think that really solidified my belief that, you work smart to get the best opportunities. And then once you get that opportunity, you work your ass off and you do anything it takes. And what I didn't realize at the time was I was showing him that I was willing to do anything and everything to help his vision, and with a good attitude, you know what I mean? Like willing and like, let's go, let's do it. And, so that, eventually translated into, that started our foundation of the relationship, and that, transferred into the editing work we did. And then, but then Ryan graduated and, had written Fruitvale, and he wanted to bring his team, as many people as he could from his team from film school, because we had success on some of these shorts. But you know, and I get why, but in the industry, when there's kind of a hot young director or somebody, they'll want to champion them, but surround them with people who've been doing it for a long time. And I get it totally. I had no experience to go in and cut Fruitvale. I think the longest thing I cut before that was like 20 minutes. And the producers didn't want us. And I get it, but Ryan refused money to start post-production on a tiny schedule for that movie, because he's like, no, I want my editor. And, you know, finally they were like, well, we need to get this movie done. So, you know, we got paid next to nothing. I slept in a closet. We worked 7 days a week. But that really started the foundation, you know, both creatively and trust-wise, and working through these problems and issues, and you know, with you know, it's kind of everybody versus the movie in a sense, you know, of hammering out these problems and solving the puzzle that make it up. You know, and then from there, you know, I realized, okay, I got a lot of work to do in my own job to get to the level that he is at his job. So then I just edited everything I could. I took every job. I was cutting a feature at the same time as a short on the weekends, and it was an absolute nightmare, but you know, it was for barely anything. But I needed to get to that place. And then when he got Creed, they didn't want to hire us because we had never done a studio movie before, even though we had won Sundance. And he had to find a way, and he stayed loyal and had the same thing on Black Panther. We never had done a Marvel movie. So they never let like directors bring in their own people they came up with, but because of how great he is and how much they believed in him, and you know, they allowed us, and we had a great experience with them, you know. So that's, you know, it's a lot of hard work and recognizing opportunities, but it's also, you know, I wouldn't be here, you know, and where I am if it weren't for Ryan and his loyalty and sort of, you know, believe. It's not even understanding. It's like a faith and a belief that the trust and the relationships that you build together coming up can make the best stuff, and we can all rise together. And Ryan treats everybody on his movie more important than the movie itself. Like, everybody feels ownership over the movie. Everybody feels validated. Like, if you have a doctor's appointment, go to the doctor's appointment. You got a thing your kid's got at school, go see your kid at school, you know. And I think that that actually creates a space for everybody to work even harder and put more of themselves into it. And so, you know, it's really amazing to have believed this stuff and worked this hard, and then it actually comes to fruition, and people are liking our movies. So can't, you know, I'm
more than
grateful.
liking.
Yeah.
More than liking.
Yeah.
I feel like Nick is like, this episode, I was telling Nick, I was like, Nick's going to be so excited. Nick went to USC as well.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, I love your story, and I love the fact that the story of Ryan's classmates is kind of so in the zeitgeist now with all of the interviews and the think pieces and stuff, because a lot of people ask me, is it worth it to go to film school? Should I go to film school? We get a lot of film students DMing us, commenting. And, you know, I say, like, I think it's different for everyone. I think it's greatly beneficial to some people. You know, I had certain classmates that I think, like, yeah, they just never, it wasn't the right path for them. And some of them, you know, left before the end, and that's totally fine. It's different for everybody. But if you're going to go, the reason to go, you can learn, you know, things on YouTube. You can listen to film podcasts, but like the thing that you can't put a price tag on is the emotional experience of it, and also the cohort of it all, because that is it's like your film school is such a, I don't know. I mean, you know, like it's like you're in the trenches. It can be it's technically not like the stakes aren't high because it's school and you're learning, but like when you're in the trenches, it does feel like this is the moment where we all become who we're destined to be. And every project is so important, but in reality, it's all just practice. And there's this camaraderie of like being in the trenches with my people, like what you were saying, sort of finding the people that it's like, oh, they think like I do and they love movies. And it is really, it's like the community you find is that's why you go, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great point. And, you know, to add to that, I think that, to your point, like I had some of the best editing professors there and some of the, best pieces of advice and that's, but that's part of the community. And, we've had professors come and watch early cuts of our movie and give us notes because we still, and when I'm like, hey, the producers are asking me this stuff about technical things. I don't know what they're talking about. What do I do? Little things like that is good. But I also think, there's sort of those foundational lessons that you kind of take with you that you learn in film school and everything from, be a good person, treat other people with respect, like help people out. Don't like close yourself off because people would do weird things, these weird political things to try to get certain scripts from other students. I'm like, what? This is, to your point, this is practice. We should be like, growing together. But some school I learned that I have friends. There are people I work with, and there are friends that I can work with, but they're not all the same people. You know what I mean? So like you may hire your best friend and they don't do a good job, and you're like, oh, okay, well, I need to separate this, but there's also this understanding. So I think it's totally a great point. And I saw that too, it just wasn't right for some people, and I also think that I feel like I don't want to put this as an absolute, but I think it's hard for, especially how institutionalized with education we are from such an extremely young age, that because it's a school, that pressure of like performing and being the best and being the top and getting the good grades, even though there really are no grades, it's just about people's response. I think it's hard. It's difficult for some people to kind of separate that when you've been a lifelong student, for 20 something years. And I think the people who sort of had the openness and a lot of that comes from just the gratitude of being there. There's a somewhat a correlation between how grateful someone is and how, and Ryan and I continue to do it. Like, people either come from a place of knowing or not knowing. And Ryan walks into every single room, even though he's probably the smartest person in there, but he's going to walk in like he knows nothing, and he's going to try to, and he listens and he learns from anybody and anything that comes up. And I think, that sort of humility in film school helps you uneducate yourself from that, like, sort of class time, and you have this time and you have that time, to this could be what I want it to be, and that's the scary thing, to not have that sort of safety net of like, oh, I'm in school, I don't have to get a job yet, I have some student loans maybe and all this stuff, but I think it's, yeah, that's a really good point.
I also think, just to what you said, it's a very important life skill. And not to say that you were ever eating shit, but to know to play this, to do everything, to take out the garbage, to nothing is too big or too small for you. If you want to work with certain people, if you think someone has a great vision, if you just want your in, like, I think some people are like, well, I went to the fancy school, I did all of these things, like, shouldn't I get the job handed? And I'm like, God, I wish. Like, yeah. I personal assistant for years because that was the in. And like, I think it's like good, like, it's so nice to hear you be like, oh no, I didn't know how to production design, but I fucking did it.
Yeah you got to figure it out. You must have a lot of hell no's with the personal assistant thing.
I was really lucky. I worked for very nice, like, kept pretty normal hours, okay, producers. Good. Yes, good. I was very, very fortunate of that.
AKA, she'll tell you those stories off air.
Yeah, there are other ones that
totally,
I'll give you.
Totally. Great, love it. Can't wait.
And do you feel like so how long this is like probably a really hard question or like a time frame to give, but how did you feel going from Fruitvale to the projects that you were doing in between that? Like, did you get all those jobs off of Fruitvale, or was it like you went out and searched for them?
A little of both, and it's all trial and error, and the weird thing. So, before, if you're lucky enough to have an opportunity that is to work on something that is seen, and you've sort of achieved a goal in your life, and you're like, okay, I did. Up to that point, you kind of believe that, okay, once I get there, once I make it, everything's going to be cool and I'm nothing to worry about. And then after Fruitvale, I woke up and I was like, oh, I still gotta pay rent and bills and figure out what my next job is and all this stuff. You kind of realize, oh, this isn't just a one-time thing. I have to keep working and grinding and meeting people. And, not all editors, but a lot of us are pretty introverted people. So going out and networking at these events, it's a little difficult for us, but what's interesting is that, nobody was interested, no agents reached out, nobody was really interested in representing me after Fruitvale, which I thought was, you'd think like somewhere someone would be interested. But someone was on a friend of ours from film school who actually left film school early, but is now a successful screenwriter, which is interesting to your point earlier, Nick. He was on the plane next to a director who went to Sundance to try to find an editor to recut his movie. And they got to talking and he's like, oh yeah, my friends made Fruitvale, this and that. And he's like, oh, do you have the editor's information? And then so that they reached out for me to do a recut of this movie. And I learned a lot of lessons on that because I didn't have an agent at the time to represent me or to like say like you shouldn't take just a flat rate for an infinite amount of time because then you're just always working and they're not making money and all this stuff. So, but I did that, and it was that movie. Like I'm very proud of that movie. But the best thing it did for me was the producers and director liked how I worked, the work that I did, how I was, how I acted, like acted professionally and respected everybody. And they reached out to different agents. And then I started getting phone calls and it's nice because the agents will call you up and they'll be like, hey, let's go get lunch. And then you have a nice sushi lunch and they talk to you and try to schmooze you and all that stuff. I had taken so then I did a couple other smaller things and realized that I kind of believe that if I'm more of these sort of like foundational mantras or whatever, always be worth more than what they pay you because then they want to hire you again, right? If ultimately like if I put my head down, do the work, accomplish what they set out to do, no matter how long it takes, the stuff will keep coming. You know what I mean? That my reputation, and I always believed that that would build me a strong enough foundation that if I ever were to fall, and I have, like there are times where I've failed or I got fired one time, and that was a lesson in this agent sent me a script and I read it and it was about a 40-something-year-old woman whose husband leaves and she's trying to take care of her sick dad, and I just said, this isn't for me. This movie, it's not my story to tell. I can't really bring much to it. It's, I always look at what can I bring to this movie and what can the movie do for me? And if there's that relationship, then that usually tells me, it's a good idea to do it. But they were like, oh, well, they really want you. And this so-and-so is a director and he's an actor and he's up and coming and this and that. And I ended up getting fired like 2 weeks later under weird circumstances. Like the director didn't even talk to me. And I don't know, it was this weird thing. But then, around that time, I had gotten a message from a woman who's my current agent now, who she just sent me an email like, "Hey, love Fruitvale. I also went to USC and this and that." And their whole thing, which I absolutely love, is they were a group of agents who didn't like how the agent-client relationship was and how like separate and cold and like not building career or like really interpersonal kind of relationship. And so they started their own agency, together. And, and they had different things that I hadn't heard, such as, they told me that they would never send me a script to read without a meeting attached to it. So it's not like I'm reading a script and then I'm chasing this person and trying to fight and struggle. It's like they do the work, they do whatever. And still to this day, like I have 5 or 6 different agents who put my name out. So it's not like I have two main agents, but and I had gotten really good advice in a pitch class at USC that said like, don't get caught up by, if you're fortunate enough to have an agency want to sign you, don't get like starstruck with the big ones in WME and these, because if you're new, they'll bury you at the bottom of the roster and that's what they'll like send to people. And then, it's whatever. So because they were sort of just starting out, I was the third editor they signed, you know what I mean? And I have a great relationship, you know, with them. Eventually I want to direct. They're going to help me, you know, when that time comes, things like that. So, you know, it was a lot of trial and errors, and a lot of times my gut told me one thing and I said, oh, let me go do it anyway. And things didn't work out, you know? And so these it's really about the little steps along the way and learning these lessons, and, but keeping that goal, you know, what you want to do and where you want to get to. And, you know, for me, my goal was I got to get better to be Ryan's editor. You know, I didn't want Ryan to go meet another editor and then be like, oh, wow, Mike is not as good as I thought, and let me go with this other person. You know, he didn't do that, and he would never do that. But that, you know, unless I didn't uphold mine to the bargain, you know what I mean? In that sense. So, you know, I think it's and then, you know, stepping outside I just lost the headphone. Stepping outside my comfort zone, and reaching out to and meeting other editors that were in the industry and doing things. And I always, when people ask for advice of what to do, whether in film school or not, I always say, you know, hit it from both angles, where find the people, like if you're an editor, find a director who doesn't like to edit, because a lot of directors don't like to edit. And I actually don't think directors should edit their own stuff. A couple cases, you know, they're great at, but you want that, you know, creative friction between two people, and that's where the best ideas come from, and, you know, all that. But find the people, you know, if you're a screenwriter, find a director. If you're a director, find some actors and just go shoot stuff, right? Like, you know, and this kind of comes from the story I told when I was a kid. I didn't have social media. I didn't have iPhones. I didn't have digital cameras. Now you can just go out and, there are feature films shot on iPhone. So like, why not go make a short, write a short in the morning together, shoot it for a couple hours, edit it at night, put it on YouTube the next day, and see what people think. You know, it's a great way to grow and learn and be in practice. And then also reach out to people who you look up to and are where you want to eventually get to. And I'm actually surprised, people who reach out to me and I respond to them and say, yeah, let's jump on a Zoom and we'll grab coffee or whatever, which I'm happy to do. I always tell my agent, like, let me know if people reach out, and if I'm available, I'm happy to help, because I knew what it's like to want to be in a certain place. But people are always so shocked that I respond and I'm willing to do it. And the truth is, not many people do. Like, the amount of people who want to be an editor, like, and other editors have said the same thing, where people don't reach out to us, you know, but we're willing to help. You know, we know this is a community. We know that, you know, and even selfishly, like, some of these people are going to hire me when I'm old and obsolete, you know what I mean? Or something like way down the road, you know? So, but passing down that tradition of sort of teaching and apprenticeship and everything. And you'd be surprised, you know, how many success stories come from even, you know, a sound person that we had on Panther, who's one of the best sound people in the world. You know, he wrote, I forget the director, but he wrote a letter to this famous director, and the director's like, yeah, come fly out to Ireland and see what we do. And that's how the guy got the start, you know? And so you never know unless you try. And I think that just trying to, you know, find any angle to make your own path, you know, I think is really important, and cultivate your own voice, I think, is also, you know, equally important.
That's a great soundbite for this episode. I feel like the theme that is emerging, because often when we do these conversations, like a sort of theme for each episode does emerge, and I feel like it's connections, and it's an interesting word and idea, because I think, you know, we read all the comments that we get on TikTok of various levels of people, and some that are disgruntled about the way the industry works, and I totally get it. But I think there's this idea, like you told that story about the person just happened to be on the plane or talking to this person, oh, the Sundance connection. Like, people have this idea, which is true, that sometimes it's like, it's almost random. It's like, well, this person ran into this person, or I met this person at a wedding. And it kind of is sometimes. Like, you can still have a team of people that are helping you try to get jobs and all that. But so much of it is like, I mean, that's just the way life works. So I bumped into this person, we had a great conversation, and then we met, and then they were like, because the film industry, and I've heard editors say this, that a big part of being an editor is also, who do I trust to, like, be alone in a room with me for months on end, that is also, like, emotionally on my level, and we can, you know, that's also part of it. Like, it's goes back to the film school thing, like being able to work with someone. That's the whole thing. And that's like the biggest roadblock on most creative projects. So it is like, anyway, I was just going to say, people have this idea that it's not fair. It's all connections, but it's a good thing because like a job could literally come from anywhere. We were on yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, even like you being like, go write something in the morning, shoot it in the day, edit it at night, throw it up on YouTube. Like you could see that. Like you saw my random TikTok, or I mean, my random Instagram reel. Like anyone could see it. Like that is how we're all connected right now. So like putting yourself out there is step one to making the connection that we'll talk about you on a flight.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Exactly.
And what solidifies that and will, you know, because there is also this level of, oh, I know this person who's an editor, but you know, there's a level of risk I think people feel when they're vouching for somebody else, because if that doesn't work out, you know what I mean? And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's not for any reason, but these people just aren't on the same page or whatever. But I think that having that foundation of doing good work and working hard and being a good, like all those things, you know, allow those connections that you're talking about, the random ones, to actually, you know, mean something and solidify and let people kind of talk about you with you know, with conviction. And you know, it's also interesting, you know, because you always hear like, oh, it's who you know, right? It's who you know, it's who you know. Well, that's actually much more broad than people think. Like, because I knew Ryan before, like he was Ryan, you know, I mean, he was always Ryan, but you know what I mean? And so now it's like, oh, you know, Ryan Coogler. Well, yeah, but we came up together like that. Like we made that connection before it was anything. So he, you know, and that a lot of it is trusting your gut and, you know, finding the people that you're on the same wavelength with, you know, to your point.
Yeah. People interpret that term, it's who you know, as like, oh, well, my dad doesn't know some studio head, but like, it can literally be anyone.
The person that inspired you in your class. You were like, oh, he's a really cool director. I do want to ask, I really love, editor, you know how they always say like you make a movie 3 times and the third time it's when you're editing. What is that? And you talked earlier about being like, I knew I couldn't bring what they were looking for to that project. What is that kind of like for you when you're looking at projects to go into that you're like, what can I bring to this? And especially like you have such a close working relationship with Ryan now. Like, what is that like for you guys too? Like, do you always know what you're bringing, or is it different every project?
That's a good question. So in terms of the specific thing with Ryan, so this is not good advice for people, but this is sort of the side of me that so you know, I in an alternate universe I would be a great politician because I can convince people of stuff and, you know, whatever, in my own ways. Or like not do as much work and then somehow turn to something. I don't know why I'm saying this, but when Ryan was deciding on the editors, you know, on that film short, like I was really busy about something and I wasn't even going to take that class until he got selected because I wanted to work with him, you know, and so I get the script and he's like, okay, I can squeeze you in this like 15-minute meeting with my producer, you know, before class and all this stuff. And I didn't have time to read the script. And so I'm meeting on this movie and I didn't even read the script. And I know it's blasphemy to talking to a couple of writers here, but he's like, so what'd you think of the script? I'm like, oh, you know, I haven't had a chance to read it yet. And he goes, oh, Mike, you're killing me, bro. I'm like, but to me, it doesn't matter. I want to work with you. I want to help you make your vision, no matter what it is. I believe in you. And if you think the script is good and can be something, my job is to help support that. And, you know, but like, so in that moment, I turned it on into something, whatever, but it actually is the truth, you know? And so with Ryan, you know, and at this point I'm like, I got the first draft of Sinners back in December something or January, you know what I mean? And I gave all these notes and those were kind of implemented, you know, but with Ryan, it's sort of like, yeah, I'm going to be involved with your something or other any way, shape or form because of our relationship. And, you know, like each movie, you know, and Sinners is the most ownership he's given to each department head out of anything. Like we all give each other notes. Like I give Ludwig notes, that drive him nuts. He gives me picture notes that drive me nuts. Ryan's sewing it all out. But when they're used to like if there was something that Ryan and I on Sinners would, like even a tiny thing about where the name Mary is said in her intro scene, right? Like at one point it was at this part at the beginning, but I was like, it feels so much better later because you're building this intrigue and then you hear her name. So the name is loaded with the emotion. And Ryan's like, no, I like it better like this. And I was like, okay. And I was ready to let it go. Cause as an editor, you're like, all right, cool. I lost that battle. I'll fight, more important battles later. And then later he's like, oh, are you going to switch that to what you want? And I'm like, oh, yeah, heck yeah. So even those little things like that of like how things are. And Sinners was really difficult because we didn't have, it was challenging in a different way for Ryan and myself because Fruitvale is a day in a guy's life. So there's that sort of basic structure. Creed is a movie, is a drama, but it's in a Rocky wrapper, right? Panther, Marvel movies, but there is no thing. Right. So we were always trying to find comparisons and movies and, obviously Dusk Till Dawn and, The Thing and Alien, Jurassic Park, all these movies that have like so much buildup. And then once it hits, it's like, let's go, So I think Ryan needed to lean on us in a lot of ways. And because of how personal it was and how much pressure he felt with the size of the budget and, needing to make certain money and wanting to make box office, like it's all stuff we think about and talk about. But I think the fact that he, a lot of directors might try to grab on harder and like hold even tighter and try to force what they want. But Ryan let go and trusted the people that he's cultivated over the years. And I it's probably the best movie we've made, and I think that's a testament to him. And I think that, it's great to be a part of that and have that feeling. When it comes to other scripts, earlier on, you have less of a choice, right? And it's like the more you do, the better work you do, the bigger movies you do, you start to be able to choose more when it comes to projects. Like I can say no to 10 projects right now if they're not right, but I got pretty bad ADD. So the first thing is if I read a script and I read the whole thing, start to finish, that's like the first big check mark because I'm engaged enough to like, you got me, you know what I mean? The carrot's on the string and I'm following along and I'm loving it. But there are other ones where I've read one page and I'm like, I would have walked out of the movie if I went to go see this kind of thing, you know what I mean? But what's funny is that when I said no to that one, that same company sent me, like that was a $2 million script. Then like 6 months later, they sent me a $5 million script and I didn't like it and I said no. And then next year they sent me a $10 million script. Like there's actually a lot of power in no if you have somewhat of a foundation. But it really is, it's something that it just something speaks to you. It's something when you hear an idea, you're like, oh, that's cool. Like whatever makes gets the juices flowing, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. But also, how do I put this? When you write, and editing's the same way, but when you're writing something and you just put it on the shelf and then you leave it for a bit and you come back and you read it again and like, wait, how come I didn't see this before? I need to change this. Or why is this working better than I ever thought? Well, the script hasn't changed. You just changed. And I think that, movies in what they are and just 3-act storytelling, from Aristotle has been, who someone is before, who they are during an ordeal, and then who they become after. And I think that that's why we all love movies and have a relationship, because we're entertained, but we're learning stuff and we're kind of growing, through the liaison of the movie and the relationship with the movie. And part of that is also, I'm on these things for 10 months to a year and a half sometimes, right? And contractually, I'm supposed to work I'm on call like 12 hours a day. Like sometimes it's 14, 16, sometimes it's crazy. Sometimes it's 21 days in a row, which is the limit the union puts a cap on. So thankfully, but you have to truly love it. Like you have to really like be able to put yourself into it. And I mean, I did a movie one time about a guy who like he comes out and he's afraid to date. And I had been out of a bad relationship before that. And editing this movie, this is going to sound weird, but like editing this movie where he's like getting out and dating again inspired me to be like, you know what, I can do it too. So that's what I mean. Like there's a weird relationship that, and I think when you can do that, having seen the results of what I put, from myself and from my own experience, whether it's for a specific storytelling reason or just because it's what I feel, that those results tend to garner more, a better result and more people liking the movie. The best directors I've ever worked with are not afraid to go to those deep emotional places that the actors have to go to. And the ones that are afraid to go there don't usually have the same, results as everybody else. So, knowing, and it's that belief that, okay, I put my human experience into something, other people are going to feel it, because we all have some sort of, shared experience in this life, and whether it's relationships or, what have you. But, I think it's almost essential to let it, and if I have like more than one choice to make at a time, I'll do the most basic thing, which is shut my eyes in a quiet room and ask myself, should I do this? And if I feel excited in my stomach, then I will probably do that one. If I don't, then I don't do it. And that's actually never failed me, with the choices that I've made. But, like I did a movie called Abigail with Radio Silence, who just wrapped on
more vampires.
More vampires.
I know.
Yes.
I'm becoming this like horror dude. I just helped out on I just did a little additional work on I Know You Did last summer.
Oh my gosh, we have to
so-
ask you such an important question before this is done. I forgot. Almost Nick. I don't think
boy.
that Nick forgot.
It can't be spoilers though.
No.
But somehow I became the horror guy. But with Radio Silence, like I love the idea and I love the script, but even if it was, if I didn't love it as much, those guys are so great, and like the meetings we had and the discussions we had and like just the mutual respect, and that translates in the editing room. Like we had a good time. We made a movie we're all proud of. So it's multifaceted, but it really is the most basic. Like, does this speak to me, and can I speak life into it?
I have a logistical question because I've never really heard anyone talk about this. So earlier you said that you had done like a recutting job, which I'm assuming is very similar to like a rewrite, right? Like someone comes in and you're kind of working with, you're molding the clay, but there's already a thing there. And it's like, how do we take this closer in the direction of where we want to go? When we see an additional editing credit, like how do credits work for editors? Like, is there any sort of arbitration the way writing is? Or like if we see additional editing, does it usually mean that someone has brought in to an existing work to sort of retool it? Like, do you have to sort of pitch on that job, and like, do you watch the cut and almost like a writer and say, here's what I would come in and do? How does that work?
Yes. All the above. it really all, I mean, it really all depends. It depends on what the need is, on where they are, how much money they have, like, so they just had an awful schedule, like just crazy tight schedule. And there was no creative, one of the things as an editor that I always try to do is, even if it's an insane schedule, the best work comes from when you have a safe creative space to work and you don't feel the pressure and you can just try stuff. Like the shot at the end of Sinners, the mid-credit scene when they say it's the best day of my life, and then Sammy smiles, and then we cut to him riding with his cousins. That, I thought of that like 20 minutes after we canceled this test screening that was stressing everybody out. And I was like, cool, I have the rest of the day just to try stuff. And then 20 minutes later, we found the best, most emotional, apropos ending to the movie. And so, man, I've been on, and I won't name names, but I've been called in by people because I have a reputation with working with difficult directors, and being able to break them through and achieve something. And, I come from a whole family of teachers. So like, it's sort of my family business to like, help have some patience and nurture and uplift and get the best out of people. But I also won't back down if I really believe in something, and believe that they're going down the wrong path. So, and that was on the indie level. So once I kind of did that with a company, they were like, oh, well, maybe once he's done with this one, can you take a look at this one? Or we want to put you up for this other movie or whatever. With I Know You Did Last Summer, they were like, we need you for a few weeks to help with tension and jump scares. And that kind of thing. Like the editor, the stories there. Yeah, it's great. So I watched a cut of the movie. I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I know how to make this better. I know like, oh, the music here will help this, or they just need to stretch this moment out and build this tension, or set this thing that you're supposed to be afraid of and wonder where it is first. Little things like that. I've been brought on, since I did a Creed movie. I did the first Creed. I got brought into Creed 3 to help with some of the montages, and bringing out, that because I had done it, successfully. Other times people get additional editor credits for coming in and doing a day or two of work, and just looking at something, but, they're helping out. And, I think credits are much more precious earlier on in your career. And even, I've had a lot of co-editors in the past, and even last year, 2 years ago, I had a studio, not studio, but like producers asked like, oh, can he edit a movie by himself? And it's like, well, yeah, I can edit a movie by myself. It's like, I've done it. Like, why are we even having this discussion? And so, but yeah, sometimes it's reading, sometimes it's watching the movie, sometimes it's reading the script, which I always say, like, once the movie's shot, I got to see what you have. Like, I need to see the clay to mold this. So and then on Sinners, it was the first one I did just by myself with, that Ryan directed. And Ryan was like, I prefer not to travel anymore. My son's 9, he's in baseball. Like, I want to be part of his life. And Ryan's like, I need you on this one because we're doing twins, we're doing this, we're shooting film, we're doing several formats, we need, this, that, and the other thing. And, I got to set and he wanted me on set, but the problem with that is that who's cutting the movie? And, when a director shoots a scene and it's been a hard day, they don't know if they have the scene or not. And that's why you need the editor to be the first audience, kind of in a different room, in a different place, and not have that referred pain from the heat and the alligators and the snakes and whatever the heck else was happening, the rain and thunder and, and all that stuff. But, you can't, studios won't ever like hire an additional editor at the beginning. It has to sort of be at their discretion later. It has to be whatever. But I, both of my assistants were interested in becoming editors. And I'm not precious about a credit. I know that the best movie is going to be the best movie and all hands on deck. Let's go. So I said, look, like, there are times I'm going to have to ask you to help assemble things, and even if it was Ryan, if Ryan's like, hey, I don't know if I got this scene, can you cut this together really quick? I would cut the scene, but then I'd have my assistants also do a version. So we're kind of seeing different perspectives, different views, and that way, like, Ryan can feel comfortable knowing, and even though, 99% of that movie is, my work and my frame, adjusting to the very, very end, their contribution for even trying different versions, like if Ryan had all this idea, he had a lot of ideas about different versions of the movie. Do we do this structure, that structure? Where does this scene go? Where does that scene go? And I needed help. I needed extra hands to try to do that. And that is, even though it a lot of the work didn't end up on screen, it's super helpful for the process for us to explore everything we possibly could to find the best thing, for this movie. So in terms of the arbitration, the only thing that if someone comes on and does like a recut of something, and they say it's like if it's 40% their work or something, then they should get an editor credit, and if they don't, then you have to go through, you know, whatever it is to get that credit. You know, I don't think it, for me, it's not important to do that. Like, even if, like, I know you did last summer, the editor is a friend of mine. She went to USC too. And I helped give her advice like earlier in her career. And she was in a tough spot, you know, and it's like, cool. Even if I came and did 50-60% change, you know, it's still her movie. She's still been on it the whole time. Like, I'm not going to take anything, you know, away from that. That she's just in a, you know, we're just in a tough position with a tough schedule. And, you know, so a lot of times it's actually the producers or executives who try to like get their friends to do it, you know, and the most insane thing that I well, actually, this might be the hell no, so I don't know if I want to save this for later.
You can save it if you want.
Well, no, I'll think of another hell no. There's been a few, but you know, I was told that I want to edit Creed 2 with this editor that I was just talking about. I know you did, and because she was the editor of Stephen Cable during film school, who we all, you know, we knew too. And I was like, oh, he's directing it, Ryan's producing it. I edited the first one. I worked with her. This is like a perfect scenario. And then after several months of one exec badmouthing me to everybody, including the director, and saying I'm difficult to work with, MGM told me I didn't have enough experience to edit Creed 2. And yeah. I made a similar face.
That math is mathing, yeah.
Well, until the box office numbers started to come out for Black Panther. And then I got a phone call saying, congratulations, you're back on the list. Oh yeah. They told me I was back on the list. I ended up, you know, after all that disrespect, I couldn't take that job, you know, even though I wanted to help. You know, but you know, and then I've been on other movies where I've done, you know, and they need one or two changes and I'm not in the areas they're cutting in, and then they're like, oh, we want to share your credit with them and give them an equal credit. And it's like, why are we doing that? You know, that's not. So typically editors are like, we get it. This is hard. We're helping each other out. Nobody's really grabbing at things, you know, to try to take credits away or get credit where it's not deserved. But, to answer your question, I think it is similar to, you know, it's basically a rewrite, you know, but what can we make? And a lot of times it's like, we got to make this more fun. You know, it's not like a specific thing. And so it's like, okay, what is fun? What is fun about this? What is, you know, and sometimes you take a job and you just have to believe that you can do it, you know, even if you don't know 100% what you're going to do, because you don't know what the footage is. You know, writing is a little different because you're like, your imagination is sort of the limit in a way, like in the sandbox that is that story. You know, and so I think recutting something is a little easier in some ways, but also more difficult. But yeah, that's pretty similar, I think.
It's very interesting. So before we ask you our last question, we can't let you go without touching on this film, because when I realized you had worked on this. So there's a film that I love, and that is also a constant source. It's just a huge part of my life, because I helped promote the film on social media. I went to an early screening. It was a movie that I didn't know anything about it. I did not know by name the person that it was about. It's a biopic. And by the end of the movie, I was sobbing. And my first thought was, I don't know how I'm going to make it. I don't know how to talk about this movie on TikTok. No one's going to believe how much I love this movie. And that kind of ended up happening, which is I kind of got bullied for people saying, you didn't actually like this. I have now seen the movie like 5 times. I've convinced everyone I know to watch this movie. So I just have to bring up Better Man, because I truly think there's something weird. Something weird happened with this film, because it was just this thing that's like...
It was amazing.
Yeah, but it was like the American audience was like, you can't bully me into watching this movie about this pop star I've never heard of.
Yeah.
You've heard the songs. You just might not know them by name.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I just, for me, it is astounding what happened with that movie, because I still get TikTok comments of people saying, oh, aren't you the guy that got paid to say you like the Monkey movie? And I'm like, what? That is... But it's like, if everyone who has watched them
I get
has said, oh, like now I get it. Like I didn't understand like what, you know, because it's an R-rated biopic where he's a monkey. And I think a lot of people were just like, what is that? And when I heard about that, I was like, what is it? But then when you see it, I truly like it is. I'm astounded that it didn't do better because I think it's so special.
So you were, what was the credit on that one?
So I was additional, and what that was basically. So I had done a couple Liam Neeson movies that were one of which was shot and produced in Australia during the pandemic, and that same producer was on Better Man, and they had a cut. I don't know at what point they were in their director's cut, and they were basically, the task was, we're at the moment we're independently funded, and VFX is very expensive, and we have a VFX, every shot's a VFX shot because of this, because of this character.
It's a monkey.
It's a monkey. And they were like, can you cut this down? Like, can you basically cut this 3 hour, 2.5, whatever version of this movie down to under 2 hours so we can afford to keep going and get the process started or whatever, It was that, and then what I realized, and I discussed with them, and they agreed, is that I kind of did an Americanized version of a thing where, like, there's some things you need to sort of, I restructured some things, but the way things are explained and not over explaining things that, not every audience will get, if because there's a lot of stuff that was in the movie that was historically accurate, but very specific to, Robert Williams and Take That and all that stuff. So it was really just like, what is the most digestible version of this for, worldwide audiences? I mean, the way they did that movie, I mean, Michael Gracey's brilliant. And I think one of the biggest reasons that it works is that nobody brings it up in the movie. Like, nobody acts like he's a monkey or different. So this weird external thing is like fully internal, and you're like, wait, is it really like this? Is it? I don't know, but I know how this guy feels, and I think that took us in a step that, and it's also like, I've heard so many people say, like, it shouldn't work, but it does, like, just
yes.
So there was that, but it was really, a lot of the stuff I did was cut it down, get to the core of the story, and just elevate each moment as much as I could, which is essentially what I try to do on everything, because it's the moments that matter, the lean forward moments in the sequences that are special, that people go home and remember and talk about, and if you make sure those things are unique, and it's interesting that there's this, there's a lot of paradoxes in filmmaking, but one of the ones I sort of always go back to is, the more specific that you make something, the more universal it actually becomes. And so, like, for example, in Black Panther, why would I relate to a king that has hundreds and billions of trillions of dollars in Africa with all this, like, technology? Well, he's got a little sister that I mean, and I had an older sister, but like sibling ribbing and rivalry and all that stuff. I relate to that. A mother who's like trying to be overprotective because this other thing happened. Oh, I know what that's like. I got a girlfriend who I don't know what the status is, and like all these things that we can all relate to in different parts of our lives is what, and that goes back to what can I bring to it? What kind of humanity can I put to it? And I think that movie, including that, the concept, and just great performances, like great writing, like the emotion, like the way they were able to get the emotion out of that character. Because you hear something about Lion King where it's like, Simba's reactions aren't the same as they were in the animated because it's, lifelike or whatever. So, but I mean, that movie, yeah, totally. Like, I love it. And I've had like good filmmaker friends of mine say like, I can't believe more people haven't seen this movie. This is my favorite movie of the year.
I know.
Like all this stuff. But
it was literally my favorite movie of the year. It's unbelievable.
Awesome. That's amazing. And the music, like, that's the thing, you've heard the music. And it's good music,
yes,
and it's
yes.
like, okay, I understand now what that is.
I did have one more question before we do where you have to pick one. Sorry, we're keeping you a little bit long. So your top tier editor, but obviously like editors are in a form, they're writers and directors themselves. So what is your like, I would imagine that will be for you in the future, going to the writing, directing, not just the editing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's,
do you have anything that you're really excited about?
Like for myself? Yeah, I mean, I have this idea. I don't want to say too much about it, but it's set in Rhode Island. Rhode Island a lot of people don't realize this, but it's been probably the most corrupt state with, mob and politics. And there was a show called Brotherhood on Showtime years ago with Jason Isaacs, where like that's based on a real story where there's a senator whose brother was a gang, and they were so it's been super corrupt. Like the mayor of Providence spent a bunch of time in jail, and almost got I think he may have gotten elected again after he got out of jail. But it's crazy. So I like the idea of a scenic place like that, and kind of small townish in ways that that story is told. It basically like how do you leave the mob essentially? But like, that's the idea that's been swimming around my head. That I got to get on paper. And then I have a good friend who's a screenwriter at USC that we met there, and he's got some great scripts, some sci-fi things. There's I'm a huge NBA fan, so there was this scandal where referees were working with the mob to gamble on games. And I think and they've made some things about that, but I don't think they captured how funny that situation actually was, because the referee writes a book where he thinks he's literally the greatest thing since sliced bread and just brags about himself, and then the guy he was in cohorts with wrote a book about how obnoxious that guy was and how awful it was. And I'm like, that is just prime conflict right there.
That's what's happening actually right now, today. That is happening to men just like fighting with each other.
I know. So it's I guess to answer your question, I want my whatever I do first to be mine, and my story, and because I know what that means, to the result and how personal it is, and but I'm a very kind of cautious. Let me make sure everything is in place, and I'm still like, I'm about to reach my prime, I think, when it comes to editing, and I want to keep riding that wave for a bit and make these more connections, because, in a couple of years from now, I'll have the pieces in place. I'll have the producers that believe in me. I'll have, Ryan has already offered to produce something for me, in the future. So, I whatever it is, it's got to be mine, and it's got to come from my interest, my personal experience. So, that's the first I've ever talked publicly about any of those things, but.
You're going to have the best team ever around you. So that's very exciting.
It's going to be exclusively, and it's going to be exclusively a USC team.
Yeah,
for sure. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much. We know you're very busy.
Very busy.
So cool. So just our last question that we love asking our guests, because everybody has stories. We would love one of the three, either a high, a low, or a hell no, which can be interpreted however you see fit, about your time working in the film industry.
So the most recent high was my son just turned 9, and we had a little birthday party from at a bowling alley, and I was talking to some of the parents, and it's usually awkward between parents because it's like, what do I say to these people? It's elevator talk, whatever. So I just started talking with one of the parents there. And, what do you do? He's like, oh, I do graphic design, this and that, whatever. And he, and he asked me, and I said, oh, I'm an editor. And, I just worked on a movie called Sinners. And he was like, wait, what's your last name? And I said, Shawver. And he said, wait, you're part of the big three? And I'm like, what? Like, and he's like, I've been supporting your movies the whole time. Check out this art I did about Sinners and da-da-da-da-da-da. And like, having that firsthand, that feeling of what you put out has affected people, and people have taken ownership. I mean, I've never seen a response like like Sinners has had in the discourse and that everybody has of what this means, what that means. And I mean, Coogler even signed up for TikTok for the first time. I'm not on TikTok, but just to see like how people were embracing this.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, you know, and not to blow up his spot, but my son had a crush on this guy's daughter. So, I hooked it up a little bit for him. You know, a real quick low is, I know you only said one, but a real quick low is,
no, go for it.
Is, when I already talked about that when I got fired. You know, cause you, there's nothing worse than like, you know, having this opportunity and thinking, you know, you're on your way and then, it was not the right situation and I made the bad choice. So picking yourself back up from that is really difficult. But my agent, you know, Louisa, the one I signed with, was like, that's unbelievable, that's ridiculous, that's blah 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 blah. By the end of the weekend, I had two other scripts and a choice of what I wanted to do next. And then the hell no was, there's a lot of those. I had a producer come in and tell me to completely cut a female character out of one of the biggest movies we've done. Not going to name names, but I'd say one of the biggest hell no's was the second movie I did. One of the producers had a movie at Sundance at the same time. And as I'm reworking their movie and working like crazy hours and all this stuff, he's just sitting behind me telling me how much better his movie was than Fruitvale. Right? Like, why? Like, what do we do? I mean, it was a power move, of course, and to try to like make him think he's cool or whatever. But it was one of those, you know.
Did you like send him all the articles after all the? You're like, here you go.
No, I you know what? I will say that I am a human being and I do always edit. I joke that a lot of my success comes out of spite, but it's mostly that chip on the shoulder of like, oh, you didn't believe I was going to do this. You didn't believe I was going to do this. You underestimated me. Like you saw me and didn't think I was whatever, like all my years, my life, you know, friends, family, and, you know, all that stuff at times. And so, you know, I take that and I use that as fuel, you know, and, because I don't want the reputation of being petty or bitter or whatever. And for as many of those difficult moments or like I don't know if you curse on the show, but
you can.
Okay, what the fuck? But you know, it's keeping that composure, keeping that cool, you know, and that helped train me for like when I would come in additional work and the editing room was, people were butting heads, and I'm like, you know, and you know, one of the best compliments I ever got was when I came on to Creed 3, Michael B. Jordan, after helping him kind of work through the sequence that was really, really difficult, you know, he's like, I don't know if I ever would have done this if you weren't here. He's like, you're extremely nurturing, you know, to this process and helping guide and, you know, I think all those lessons learned and just staying above the bullshit, right? Like just let everybody else be fighting and doing whatever, but if I can stay above, that resonates with people, you know, even if I think they don't like me or don't like my work, you know, there's something to be said for that. So yeah,
that's amazing. I also really love when men give other men compliments. I feel like it doesn't happen enough, so I'm glad that you got some direct flowers.
It is really nice. No, it's amazing. But yeah, totally.
Thank you so much.
This is incredible.
This was amazing.
Great. No,
oh my goodness.
Great interview. Super chill. Like exactly like you said.